Following the end of the First Punic War, the Carthaginians found themselves in the midst of an all-out rebellion. They tried to avoid paying their mercenaries, but this backfired spectacularly, and the mercenaries revolted. They were soon joined by the oppressed Libyan communities, and Carthage was surrounded by enemies on all sides. The Mercenary War, as it is known, lasted for 3 long years. Carthage found itself on the brink of collapse several times, but in the end it was saved by the brilliance of one general, Hannibal Barca. After the war, the Romans exploited the weak position Carthage was left in to take over the islands of Sardinia and Corsica. This significantly reduced Carthaginian naval presence in the Mediterranean, but more importantly, this insult was never forgotten by the Barcid family. Back in Carthage, Hamilcar was blamed for the outbreak of the Mercenary War. The promises he made to his troops on Sicily during the First Punic War were cited as the reason the mercenaries rebelled in the first place. The anti-Barcid faction in the Senate, led by Hanno the Great, tried to put Hamilcar on trial, but they were unsuccessful. During the rebellion, Hamilcar gained the favor of the army, the populace, and the Senate. He allied with Hasdrubal the Fair, offering him one of his daughters in marriage, and the two men effectively took control of the city. They limited the power of the aristocracy, giving voice to the people, who heavily favored Hamilcar for his role in the Mercenary War. This marks the start of the period known as the Barcid Supreme, during which the members of the Barcid family held virtually unlimited power over Carthage. After dealing with the Sardinian crisis, Hamilcar immediately turned his attention to Spain. Ships prepared for the Sardinian expedition could now be used to transfer him and his troops to Iberia. His force couldn't have been large. At the end of the Mercenary War, in 237 BC, the Carthaginians controlled some 40,000 troops. Some of these men had to stay back to garrison Carthage, while others were placed along the Numidian border. Some estimates put the number of troops at Hamilcar's disposal at around 20,000, presumably with some elephants to boot. Before departing, there was only one thing left to do. Hamilcar, along with his family and closest associates, performed ritual sacrifice to the supreme god of the Punic religion, Baal Hamon. Hamilcar's eldest son, Hannibal, who was 9 at the time, attended this ritual. When favorable omens were observed, Hamilcar asked his son if he would follow him into Spain. The boy was eager to accompany his father, and he swore an oath, never to bear goodwill to the Romans. It's unclear if this episode really happened, but Hannibal himself would go on to tell this story to the Seleucid king Antiochus III during his exile, 44 years later. After wrapping up all obligations to the state and the gods, Hamilcar, his son Hannibal, his son-in-law Hasdrubal, and 20,000 troops finally set off for Spain in 237 BCE. They sailed along the North African coast, crossed the Pillars of Hercules, and arrived in Iberia. At that time, Iberia was home to several different ethnic groups. Iberians occupied the south and east of the peninsula. Celt-Iberians and other Celtic tribes were located in the central plateau and further to the north. Lusitanians were in the far west of modern-day Portugal, and the Aquitanians, the Proto-Basque peoples, inhabited the Pyrenees mountain range in the northeast. These peoples were not united, but they were rather groups of many different tribes who shared common languages and cultures. This played right into the Carthaginian hand, as they could play tribes off one another. Centuries of fighting among themselves made Hispanic tribes capable warriors. Hamilcar's plan was to conquer as many tribes as he could, increasing the number of available conscripts and mercenaries. These efforts would be rewarded, as his son Hannibal was eventually accompanied by as many as 10,000 Hispanics on his invasion of Italy. These men would prove exceptionally loyal to their Punic chieftains. But Iberia offered a lot more to Carthage than simple manpower. The peninsula was rich in natural resources. Large fertile plains in the south were accompanied by numerous silver mines. Proceeds from these mines would soon start flooding Carthage with ample funds. Long before Hamilcar's expedition, the Phoenicians established several colonies on the Iberian Peninsula. These colonies were long under Punic influence, and Hamilcar could use them as a base of operations. Surviving literary sources on Hamilcar's campaign are few and far between. Diodorus mentions only a few events during his 9-year-long campaign, while others just mention it in passing. This means that modern historians are left with filling in the blanks and piecing together what little information they do have. Hamilcar and his force landed in Gades. He first confronted a coalition of Iberians and Tartessians under the joint command of 2 Celtic generals. The generals were accompanied by a contingent of Celtic mercenaries, most likely the nearby Celt-Iberians. As we have already mentioned, Iberian communities weren't united, so this coalition must have been limited in size, but we are told that they vastly outnumbered the Carthaginian force. This coalition was smashed by Hamilcar and the two generals, with most of the high-ranking officers killed. 3,000 of the surviving warriors joined the Punic army. This not only increased Hamilcar's military strength, but also showed others that the general was inclined to mercy. This victory was followed up with the conquest of Tartessian territory. These lands included not only the fertile plains of the lower Batis Valley, but more importantly a number of silver and copper mines along the Rio Tinto River. These mines were already in operation, and soon enough Gade started issuing new high-quality silver coinage. Hamilcar now turned his attention to the upper Batis Valley. This area was well populated, with numerous towns dotted around the river. Again, more important than the valley itself were the rich mineral deposits in the Sierra Morena mountain range, as well as the even richer ones around the Iberian town of Castulo. Diodorus informs us that Hamilcar confronted a large Hispanic army, 50,000 strong. These were most likely the inhabitants of the Batis Valley who found themselves in Hamilcar's way. It just so happened that luck was on the side of Hamilcar, and most of this army deserted or switched sides before a battle could be fought. This was no doubt connected to the new silver mines under Hamilcar's control. With this new influx of coins, Hamilcar could buy the loyalty of the men. The rest of the army retreated to a nearby hill, but they were surrounded and killed or captured while trying to make a breakthrough. The leader of this army was mutilated and crucified, but the soldiers, no fewer than 10,000, were set free. This was no doubt a message to the other would-be leaders of resistance in Iberia. These campaigns lasted throughout 236, or at the latest 235. From here there are no more details on his campaign. Diodorus only states that he brought many cities in Iberia under his control through fighting and diplomacy. His eventual demise suggests that he was bogged down by fighting in the Sierra Morena mountain range. In 235, his activities were finally noticed back in Carthage when horses, weapons, men and money began flooding into the city. These new resources were used to greatly enrich Carthage and help prepare the war-torn Libyan communities. Sometimes during Hamilcar's campaign in Iberia, some of the Numidians revolted against Carthaginian rule. He took the threat seriously and sent his son-in-law Hasdrubal to Africa. Hasdrubal had no military experience prior to the Iberian expedition, but it's reasonable to assume he studied under Hamilcar in Spain. Hasdrubal was successful and he quickly put down the rebellion. It's possible that after his victory, Hasdrubal established two separate kingdoms in Numidia. The two different kings would go on to play a crucial role during the Second Punic War. After re-establishing order in Africa, Hasdrubal returned to Spain. With him came Hamilcar's second son, conveniently also named Hasdrubal, who was around 10 at the time. Hamilcar took great care in educating his sons on all matters of military command. In time they would become great leaders, holding high-ranking positions in the army. During the late 230s, Hamilcar expanded his influence along the southern coast of Iberia. On the eastern end of this newly conquered territory, he founded the city of Acraleuce. Although there is no concrete proof, it's generally believed that this city was located near modern-day Alicante. This town was turned into Hamilcar's new headquarters. From here he could launch his next campaign into the Iberian interior. Dio Cassius tells us that the Romans sent a delegation to Hamilcar in 231 BCE. They were concerned about his growing empire in Iberia. Hamilcar greeted the envoys and simply explained that he was gathering booty in order to pay off the indemnity owed to Rome. The envoys, pleased with his answer, returned back to Rome. This episode wasn't mentioned by any other Roman historians, nor do we have any evidence that the Romans were intervening in Iberia before 226 BCE. Although this is often cited when discussing Hamilcar's campaign in Iberia, it's likely just another piece of historical fiction by Roman authors. In late 229, Hamilcar, accompanied by his two sons, set off from Acraleuce and marched his army to Helice. During this campaign, Hasdrubal was in command somewhere else in Iberia. The true location of Helice is unknown, but it must have been somewhere in the Sierra Morena mountains. Hamilcar besieged the city, and as the winter set in, he sent a bulk of his force, including the elephants, back to Acraleuce. During the siege, the king of the Oretani came to offer aid to Hamilcar, who was happy to accept. But this was only a trick, and the Oretani turned on the small Carthaginian force. Hamilcar sent his sons and close friends down one road, while he took the other, drawing off the pursuers. Hamilcar was about to be overtaken, but he plunged into a river on horseback. The flooding river overpowered his horse, and in 228 BCE, Hamilcar perished. He was around 50 years old at the time. His sacrifice saved his sons, who successfully reached Acraleuce, where they were soon joined by Hasdrubal. Hamilcar achieved much during his life. He not only saved Carthage from utter ruin during the Mercenary War, but he brought it to new heights with his Spanish conquest. He maintained political dominance unseen in Carthage since the time of Magonids, some 300 years prior. Hamilcar played a large part in Roman imagination, growing from a brilliant general in the time of Polybius to a larger-than-life figure solely responsible for the Hannibalic War in Livy's time. But if we look more closely, we see a great but flawed general. His campaign in Sicily amounted to nothing. His ample promises to the mercenaries before abandoning them were the main reason for the outbreak of the Mercenary War. A few blunders against the rebels and now a disaster at Helice. These are some of the mistakes Hamilcar Barca made, but to be fair, they are few and far between. Although Hamilcar held almost monarchical rule in Spain, he never intended to crown himself king of Carthage. He was a democratically elected leader, akin to Pericles in Athens, or the first citizen of Carthage. His most notable achievement was building a power base, which his son could later exploit with great effect. After Hamilcar's death, his son-in-law Hasdrubal the Fair combined his army with those in Acraleuce. He was then elected by the soldiers as their new leader. This decision was later ratified in Carthage, confirming him as the most senior general in the country. Hannibal was still a teen, making Hasdrubal the logical choice for Hamilcar's successor. His first order of business was avenging his late father-in-law. He marched out with a massive army numbering 50,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and as many as 200 elephants, making it one of the largest elephant corps on record. He easily defeated the Oretani, killing all those responsible for Hamilcar's death and subjugating the rest. Avenging his father-in-law was an important political move, showing the Barca dynasty was still going strong. In contrast to Hamilcar, Hasdrubal was more of a politician and statesman. He had a different approach to ruling newly conquered territory. Upon taking command, Hasdrubal took the daughter of an Iberian king for a wife. This move endeared him to the Iberians and they recognized him as their leader. The fate of Hamilcar's daughter, Hasdrubal's former wife, is unknown. After securing loyalty from the Spaniards, he sailed off to Carthage. His true motives are unknown. Some writers suggest that he tried to crown himself king, but this is very unlikely. Hasdrubal confirmed his political supremacy in the city and left Carthage never to return. Back in Spain, he started his biggest project yet, the construction of a new regional capital, Carthago Nova, today's Cartagena. In Punic, the city was named Carthagast or simply Carthage. Although some authors claim that this was meant as a challenge to the original Carthage, this again doesn't hold up to any further scrutiny. This is far from the first time that name was used for a new Carthaginian settlement. His primary goal was to impress the onlookers, namely the Romans. Not one but two powerful cities named Carthage would be a message in itself. In this he succeeded. Carthago Nova was impressive from the very beginning. It was built on 4 hills dominating a great natural harbor. On one of the hills, Hasdrubal built a citadel and a governmental palace. The location chosen was more favorable than Acraleuce, as it was better connected to the rest of the Punic holdings. Nearby silver mines were just an additional bonus. When the city was built, the Romans finally took notice of the Carthaginians in Spain, and in 225 they sent envoys to Hasdrubal. They agreed that the Ebro River would mark the boundary between the Roman and Carthaginian spheres of influence in Spain. Both sides were happy with this arrangement. The Romans could focus on the looming Celtic threat, while the Carthaginians could continue their expansion in Iberia. Again, we are given no details on Hasdrubal's actions in Spain. We are told that he expanded Carthaginian influence further north, reaching the Tagus River, which splits Iberia nearly in half. This was achieved through a combination of military action and diplomatic means. As time went on, Hamilcar's forces grew, and in 224 BCE, he appointed Hannibal as his cavalry commander, effectively making him second in command. Hannibal excelled at this post and he further honed his martial abilities. Hasdrubal ruled for 8 years, and his end came as abruptly as that of his predecessor. In 221 BC, he put to death one of the Spanish chieftains, only for his loyal followers to break into Hasdrubal's quarters and murder him in his sleep. Hasdrubal consolidated Hamilcar's gains, even expanding them somewhat. The Carthage he left behind outclassed the one from 264 both financially and militarily. The Numidian threat at home was subdued, and their new overseas empire was flourishing. The Carthaginian army was virtually superior to all others in the known world. The leadership on all levels, from low-ranking officers all the way to the supreme general, was unparalleled, as time would soon show. In 20 short years, Carthage was transformed from near collapse to a dominant power of the Mediterranean. This dominance would soon be put to the ultimate test. Following Hasdrubal's death, the army elected Hamilcar's eldest son, Hannibal Barca, as their new leader. Ever since Hannibal was 9 years old, he lived among the soldiers. He accompanied his father into Spain and followed him on his campaigns. He later served under Hasdrubal as a commander of the cavalry. Now he was 25 years old and already a capable military leader. The army saw Hannibal as one of their own, and there was no question who would be chosen to lead them. Hannibal wasn't alone in Spain. His two younger brothers, Hasdrubal and Mago, and also younger nephew Hanno, were all high-ranking officers in the army. This just shows that the Barcid hold over the army was as strong as ever. The things were not much different in Carthage. We know of only one Barcid family member who stayed behind, another Mago. Despite this, Barcid dominance over the politics in the city was undisputed. Although a rival faction did exist, most of the senators were inclined towards the Barcids. Successful military campaigns and mountains of silver flowing in from Spain would ensure this support for years to come. Although Hannibal probably planned to visit Carthage at one point or another, the outbreak of the Second Punic War would delay him for almost 20 years, meaning that he didn't step inside the city for his entire adult life. Following in Hasdrubal's footsteps, Hannibal took a Spanish wife, further strengthening the bond between the Barcid family and the Iberians. By now the loyalty of the Carthaginian army was unparalleled. We have no reports of any large-scale mutinies or desertions during the long Italian campaign. Considering that the Carthaginian army consisted of several different nationalities and a mix of levies and mercenaries, this is a remarkable feat. After taking command in 221 BCE, Hannibal immediately launched a campaign against the Alcaides. After capturing Althea, their strongest fortified town, the rest of the tribe surrendered. The quick subjugation of the Alcaides suggests that the preparations for this campaign were long underway. In 220, after concluding this campaign, he marched further north towards the Vaci. The Vaci inhabited the plains along the river Duero. On his march north, he passed through the territory of Carpetani, who allowed him to pass undisturbed. Hannibal took the city of Hermandica with ease and proceeded to besiege Arbucala. This town offered more resistance, and it took Hannibal some time to take it. When the city finally fell, the winter was approaching and campaigning season was at an end. Hannibal started marching south, leaving the other population centers north of the river Duero untouched. The refugees from the captured towns escaped south and convinced Carpetani to turn on Hannibal. The Alcaides joined this coalition, and the allied army tried to stop Hannibal. They attacked the Carthaginians while crossing the river Tagus, but were soundly beaten. This battle is the first recorded instance of Hannibal's brilliance as a general. He lured the enemy into crossing the river and fell on them while they were out of position. The allied army was annihilated, and Hannibal safely continued his march south. With these successful campaigns, Hannibal, who was virtually unknown in Carthage, reaffirmed his position as the supreme general and foremost man in the Republic. It was now that the tribes south of the river Ebro came under Punic protection. One of these tribes, the Turitani from the town of Turis, had trouble with the nearby Saguntum. Saguntum was a well-fortified city on the Mediterranean coast. Although it was south of Ebro, meaning in the Carthaginian zone of influence, it was in friendly relations with Rome for years now. The Saguntines would periodically send information to Rome, keeping them updated on the Carthaginian doings in Iberia. But the Romans were busy with the Celtic invasion, and they failed to take notice of this small town. Now, however, things have changed, and the Romans were ready to put their weight behind Saguntum. While Hannibal was on his way back to Carthago Nova, he got the news that the two Roman ambassadors were waiting for him. He realized this could only mean one thing. After Hannibal finished with his planned campaigns, he had few options left. He could try to conquer troublesome Basque people who dwelt in the mountains of northern Spain. He could return to Africa and try to expand Carthaginian holdings back home, or he could abandon military campaigns and rule Spain in peace. None of these options seemed inviting to Hannibal. The last and by far the best option was to expand north over the Ebro and towards the Pyrenees mountains. However, this option was blocked by the treaty agreed by Hasdrubal 5 years ago. The Roman envoys came to Spain to discuss this treaty. When they met Hannibal, they laid out their two demands loud and clear. Firstly, he was to abstain from interfering with Saguntum, and secondly, he was not to cross the river Ebro. The envoys didn't come to negotiate with him, but rather demand his obedience. This went as well as you can expect, and the envoys were informed that Saguntum would be absorbed into the Punic sphere of influence. There is no evidence that Hannibal was planning to attack Saguntum before this meeting, and it seems that the Romans caused the one thing they wanted to avoid. Hannibal refused to talk about the river Ebro, implying that he had no intention of respecting the old treaty. The envoys, unsuccessful in their mission, tried to salvage the situation by appealing to the authorities in Carthage. But a letter from Hannibal arrived first, and the envoys got no satisfactory answer from the Senate, and they returned to Rome. Hannibal now asked permission from Carthage to attack Saguntum. The Barcids never before asked permission to wage war in Spain, and the implication was clear. Was Hannibal allowed to start another war with Rome? He was given a free hand by the Carthaginian Senate, and in 219 BCE, Hannibal marched his army towards Saguntum. Join us next time as we discuss the siege of Saguntum and the outbreak of the Second Punic War. The Roman envoys came to space.